Christmas Eve always smells like cinnamon and cold air where I live. The kind of cold that sharpens everything: sounds, light, memory. I was standing at the kitchen counter folding wrapping paper back into its roll when my phone buzzed. A photo came through first. My daughter on the sidewalk, her pink gloves too thin for the weather, a plastic grocery bag stretched in her hand, presents peeking through the top. The streetlights behind her blurred into soft halos. My name is Rachel. I'm 30 years old. She'd walked to my mom's house by herself the way she'd practiced, counting driveways, repeating the route in her head because she wanted to surprise them. She'd picked the gifts carefully. Scarf for my mom. A mug for my dad. Little things, but chosen with the seriousness only an 8-year-old can bring to generosity. When my mom opened the door, she didn't bend down. She didn't smile. She said it flat, like a rule she just remembered. We're keeping it small this year. Only real family. Then she closed the door. The photo didn't capture that part. Captured the after. My daughter standing still, shoulders tucked in, the bag sagging heavier now that it wasn't needed. She didn't cry in the picture. She just looked smaller. She walked home alone. I don't remember sitting down, but I did. The kitchen light hummed above me. Outside, someone laughed across the street, the sound carrying too easily in the cold. I replayed the words in my head, not to argue with them, just to understand how they'd been said to a child who shares my last name. A memory drifted in, uninvited. Me at that same door years ago, being told to be patient, to be understanding, to not make things difficult during the holidays. Family politics explained as weather. Unavoidable, inconvenient, something you dress around. My daughter texted when she reached our building. A simple message. I'm home. No emojis. No explanation. Children learn quickly what hurts aren't worth naming. I met her at the door and took the bag from her hands. The plastic was cold and stretched thin. She shrugged out of her coat and went straight to her room. I heard the soft thud of the door closing. Not slammed. Just shut. I didn't call my mother. I didn't call my father. I didn't raise my voice. I made tea and let it steep until it went bitter, watching the steam rise and disappear. Calm can be a decision when anger would be easier. I sat at the table and opened my laptop. The house smelled like pine cleaner and something sweet burning on the stove where I'd forgotten a pan. I turned it off without looking. My hands were steady. That surprised me. I thought about all the small ways I'd been keeping things running. Shared accounts I'd never separated. Subscriptions I paid for because it was simpler. Access I'd never questioned because it felt like love. I made a list. Short. Precise. I logged into the first account and changed the password. Then another. I removed automatic payments. I updated contact permissions. I didn't block anyone. I didn't announce anything. I just closed doors that had been left open too long. In the other room, my daughter started humming softly to herself, the tune uneven, comforting in its attempt. I breathed with it. Slow in. Slow out. I wasn't doing this to anyone. I was doing it for someone. Within an hour, my phone started lighting up. Missed calls stacked neatly. My father first. Then again. Messages followed. Confused, urgent, suddenly attentive. I let the phone vibrate against the table and kept working, clicking through settings with care. I tucked my daughter in later and kissed her forehead, breathing in the clean smell of soap and winter air. She asked if she'd done something wrong. No, I said. You didn't. The phone buzzed again in my pocket, insistent now. I didn't answer. Not yet. Some changes don't need speeches. They just need to happen. The phone didn't stop after that. It vibrated across the table like it was trying to crawl closer to me, each call stacking urgency on top of confusion. My father left a voicemail first. His voice sounded tight, controlled, already framing the problem as a misunderstanding that needed quick correction. He said my mom hadn't meant it that way. He said emotions were high. He said we'd talk tomorrow. Tomorrow has always been their favorite place to put accountability. I listened once. Then I didn't play it again. I went into my daughter's room and sat on the edge of her bed while she lined her stuffed animals into a careful row. The small lamp cast a warm circle of light over her hands. She asked if Grandma was mad at her. The question came out sideways, like she was hoping it wouldn't land. I told her Grandma made a bad choice. I told her adults sometimes protect their comfort instead of children's feelings. I didn't say anything about family being complicated. I've learned how often that phrase teaches kids to excuse harm. She nodded, serious, then asked if we could still open presents in the morning. I said yes. She smiled at that, relief quick and bright, and I felt something in my chest loosen just enough to breathe again. When I went back to the kitchen, the house felt different. Quieter but not empty. I poured the bitter tea down the sink and rinsed the mug, listening to the water rush and stop. The laptop was still open, my list still waiting. I added one more item. Then another. I canceled the shared streaming account I'd been paying for. I removed my card from the grocery delivery app my mom used, just this once. I updated emergency contacts. Each change was small on its own. Together they were unmistakable. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my mom. A text, not a call. Short. Defensive. She said it had been a misunderstanding. She said she hadn't expected my daughter to come alone. She said Christmas was stressful and she didn't need drama. I read it twice. I didn't respond. A memory surfaced, quiet and precise. Me at 10, standing in a hallway while my parents argued in the kitchen, being told to go to my room so things wouldn't escalate. Being removed so adults could stay comfortable. The pattern hadn't changed. Only the generation had. The next message came from my aunt. Then my cousin. Concern layered over curiosity. People trying to gather context without asking the person who had been hurt. I muted the thread. Around midnight my father called again. When I finally answered, I didn't speak first. He filled the silence the way he always does when he's unsure. He said my mother was upset. He said she'd been misunderstood. He said this didn't need to become a big thing. I told him calmly that it already was. Not because I'd made it one. Because they had. He asked what I wanted. The question surprised both of us. I said I wanted my daughter treated like family or not invited at all. I said I wouldn't negotiate her worth. I said access to me came with respect for her. He was quiet for a long time. In the background I heard a television and the clink of ice in a glass. Normal sounds. Life continuing while something fundamental shifted. He finally said, "Your mom didn't mean to hurt her." I said, "She did." And for the first time I didn't soften it to make the conversation easier. When we hung up, my phone stayed still for a while. I turned off the lights and stood by the window watching snow start to fall, thin and deliberate. Each flake separate. Each one landing exactly where it meant to. I understood then that the changes I'd made weren't temporary. They were corrections. And by morning everyone else would understand it too. Christmas morning arrived quietly, like it wasn't sure it was welcome. The sky was pale, almost colorless, and the street outside lay still under a thin dusting of snow. I woke before my daughter and sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, watching steam curl upward and vanish. My phone lay face down beside me, heavier than it should have been. When I finally turned it over, there were more messages. My dad again. My mom this time too, longer now, emotional, swinging between apology and defense in the same paragraph. She said she hadn't realized how it would sound. She said she was protecting the family atmosphere. She said she loved her granddaughter. Love, I thought, isn't a word you use to close doors. My daughter padded into the kitchen in her socks, hair sticking up, eyes already searching for reassurance. I smiled and told her it was time. We opened gifts slowly, laughing at the wrong batteries and the socks that were too big. The apartment filled with paper and warmth and the sound of her joy rebuilding itself piece by piece. I held on to that sound. Mid-morning the knocking started. Not gentle. Not tentative. Firm, insistent, the kind that assumes it will be answered. I looked through the peephole and saw my parents standing in the hallway, coats still on, faces tight with a mix of anger and panic. My dad raised his hand to knock again, then stopped when he saw the light shift behind the door. I opened it partway. My mom started talking immediately. She said this was all being blown out of proportion. She said Christmas emotions run high. She said we shouldn't involve the child. My dad cut in, voice sharper now, demanding to know why accounts weren't working, why payments had failed, why he couldn't access things he'd always had. I felt a strange calm settle over me, like my body had already finished the argument without my help. I told them we could talk, but not like this. Not in front of my daughter. Not with anger leading the conversation. My mom tried to step forward anyway, her voice cracking now, saying she just wanted to see her granddaughter. I didn't move aside. Behind me, my daughter stood in the hallway, clutching her new sweater, watching silently. I placed a hand behind me without looking, a quiet signal. Stay here. I told my parents the truth. I said what happened last night crossed a line that doesn't get smoothed over with explanations. I said my daughter would never again be put in a position where her belonging was conditional. I said access to us required accountability, not urgency. My dad scoffed. He said I was being dramatic. He said family doesn't operate with ultimatums. I told him boundaries aren't ultimatums. They're clarity. That's when the panic fully surfaced. He asked what they were supposed to do now. He said they needed me to undo whatever I'd changed. He said things were already going wrong. I understood then what I'd actually taken away. Not money. Not convenience. Control. And without it, they didn't know how to stand. My mom started crying in earnest, asking how I could do this on Christmas. The timing accusation, the last defense. I looked past her into the hallway at the framed photos lining the wall of their apartment building. Smiling faces. Perfect moments. I said calmly, you chose the timing. They left angry. Not resolved. Not forgiven. Just gone. I closed the door and leaned my forehead against it for a moment, listening to their footsteps fade down the stairs. My daughter didn't speak right away. She just hugged me around the waist, tight and trusting. I held her there and knew with absolute certainty that whatever storm was coming next would be worth weathering. Because some doors, once closed to a child, should never be reopened without consequence. By the afternoon, the panic had fully set in. I didn't see it, but I could hear it in the way my phone finally started ringing again. No longer demanding, no longer angry. Just urgent. My dad's name lit up the screen over and over, the pauses between calls getting shorter each time, like he was afraid silence meant something irreversible had already happened. I didn't answer right away. I made lunch. Grilled cheese and tomato soup. The apartment filled with the smell of butter and warmth, ordinary and grounding. My daughter sat at the table in her pajamas, feet swinging, telling me about a game she wanted to invent. Her voice was light again. That mattered more than anything buzzing in my pocket. When I finally answered, my dad didn't start with accusations. He started with confusion. He said things weren't working. He said bills were bouncing. He said accounts he relied on were suddenly inaccessible. He asked what I'd done, like he already knew the answer but hoped there was a version where it wasn't permanent. I told him exactly what I'd done. I said I separated my finances. I said I removed shared access. I said I made changes that reflected the reality they'd made clear the night before. He went quiet. Then his voice dropped, edged with disbelief. He said they were counting on me. He said my mom hadn't slept. He said this wasn't how family treats each other. I thought about my daughter standing on that porch holding a bag of gifts that suddenly didn't qualify her as family. I thought about the door closing. I let the silence sit long enough to hold that memory between us. I told him family doesn't exclude children and then ask for help like nothing happened. I told him I wasn't punishing anyone. I was protecting someone. I told him if my daughter wasn't considered real family, then my resources weren't either. That was the moment it landed. His voice cracked. Not with anger. With fear. He asked what they were supposed to do now. I told him they'd figure it out the same way I always had, by adjusting. By owning their choices. By living with the consequences instead of outsourcing them. After we hung up, the phone went quiet. Completely. No more messages. No more calls. Just the low hum of the refrigerator and my daughter humming to herself as she colored at the table. That night, after she fell asleep, I stood in the doorway of her room and watched her breathe, slow and even. The house smelled like clean dishes and pine cleaner. Outside, snow muffled the city into something soft and distant. I felt tired but not heavy. Resolute but not hard. If you've ever been the one expected to absorb disrespect for the sake of peace, you know how quickly, keep it small becomes, make yourself disappear. Some families don't notice your value until your support is gone. I don't know what the future looks like with my parents. I know it won't look like before. And that's okay. The version of peace that required my child to shrink was never peace at all. I didn't raise my voice. I raised my standard. My child came first.